Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Wednesday morning Tanya Shaar. We're studying Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah. This is part 3. If you have a Tanya in front of you, we're going to go from the words V'chein b'chol haberuim. I'll review quickly what we've learned, and then we're going to, as Hashem, we're going to continue from there. So Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah comes to grapple first and foremost with the most fundamental question that really all of Chabad Chassidus is dedicated to grappling with. It's the Shaila we refer to as Achdus Havaya, or the unity of Hashem, and it's how to reconcile a contradiction. On the one hand, when the Torah tells us in the words in the pasuk that all of Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah is based on, you should know today that Hashem is God in the heavens and that which is above the heavens, in the earth and that which is below. Einoid. We understand this to mean not just that there's no other deity besides for Hashem, but actually that nothing else exists, right? Or when it says Einoid milvadoi, once again, it means not just that there's no other God besides for Hashem, nothing else exists besides for Hashem, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's not just that we experience a reality that seems very real. It's not just that we, live in a world and deal with a life that seems very real as a separate existence to Hashem. It's not just that it seems that way. Chassidus says we understand from other psukim in the Torah, like Bereshis Borah L'kimas Hashemayim V'Sa'aretz, that Hashem actually did create a world, and He created it Yesh Me'ayin, which is a term we'll deal with in Perek Beis of Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah. But definitely one of the things that it means when we say that Hashem created the world Yesh Me'ayin is that it does have, even from Hashem's perspective, and it was created intentionally that way, it does have some element of Yesh, it does have some element of existence. Hashem actually created something. In Chassidus, it's discussed that it would be incorrect to assume that the whole world doesn't really exist and it's just some sort of a fantasy. The Chassidus discusses what we call this havamina. In other words, this idea, this attempt to resolve the contradiction by saying, look, the Torah says Einoid means nothing else exists besides for Hashem, finished. It seems like everything is so real. So Chassidus discusses this actually at great length, very fascinatingly, that one of the attempted ways to resolve this is to say it's just, it seems that way. When you're having a dream, the dream seems very real, and it's nishkishtoik and nishkefloigen. It's a baba maisa. When children hear stories, their imaginative minds have difficulty differentiating between what's real and what's fake. So compared to Hashem, we're definitely no more advanced than a child. So the world seems real. So it seems real. That Chassidus talks about this. From our teachers, our Chassidus teachers, they always taught us that Chassidus doesn't just talk about this stam as an idea. There were those Talmidei Baal Shem, there were the students of the Baal Shem and the students of the Magid, who actually believed this. They took this approach. They said, look, the Torah says nothing else exists besides for Hashem. Nothing else exists. It's a figment of our imagination. Chassidus Chabad refuses to accept this. No. The same Torah that says Einoid says the Eibishter created the world. So how do we resolve this? This is what's going to be grappled with here in Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah. And again, as we discussed, Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah is really just the Chumash, if you will, the Bible of this. After this, in the Mamorim of the other Rebbes, and particularly in the Mamorim of the Rebbe Rashab, and all the Rebbes, as we discussed, it's developed in many, many, many layers. Okay. So the first thing the Alter Rebbe does in Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah is introduce us to this teaching of the Baal Shem Tov on the pasuk L'olam Hashem Dvorcha Nitzav Bashamayim. The translation of the pasuk: forever Hashem, your word stands firm in the heavens. The Baal Shem Tov explained that when the pasuk says your word stands firm in the heavens, it's not talking about all of it. It's not just a pasuk about all of Hashem's words, that all of Hashem's words are eternal. It's speaking about specific words of Hashem that have a unique relationship with the heavens that requires these words to be present in the heavens l'olam, forever. Which words are these? These are the words Yehi Rakia B'Sai Chamayim, the words that the Rabbeinu Shalom uttered, that the Eibishter uttered, in order to bring the heavens into existence. These words remain constantly. The Alter Rebbe, in fact, uses the word muluboshes, which means they're enclosed. Or let's say, in this context, let's use the term, they're invested in the heavens constantly to keep it into existence. And then he says those famous words, Ilu hoyu ha'oisiyos mistalkois kerega chas v'shalom, that if, the Alter Rebbe is explaining the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that the reason why these words need to be in the heavens constantly is because were the oisiyos, the letters that Hashem uttered to bring the heavens into existence, were they to be mistalik, were they to depart, kerega, if but even for a moment, chas v'shalom, and the words are words of Hashem, right? So they cannot cease to exist, they're eternal. When we say depart, what we mean is not that they cease to exist, but when we say depart is they go back into the original source, the Eibishter himself. The heavens that Hashem created through these words would immediately become, quote, ayin ve'efes mamash. There's an explanation from the Rebbe why the Alter Rebbe adds the word mamash over here, which I'll get to in a second. They would be not just nothing, it would be absolutely nothing. And it would be as if it never existed at all. The heavens would cease to exist as if they never existed, as if like before Hashem said the words Yehi Rakia, and again the Alter Rebbe adds the word mamash. Okay, so very briefly, what's this obsession with the word mamash, right? Ayin ve'efes mamash, u'k'moy koydem maimer Yehi Rakia chulu mamash. So there's footnotes from the Rebbe on this on the Likutei Sichos. Very nuanced explanations. I just want to highlight two quick points. First of all, what's ayin ve'efes mamash, right? Mamash is a term we use. It became even like a Yiddish expression. You know, when we say something is actual or literal or powerful, we say, you know, are you going to be on time? I'm going to be there at 9:30 sharp, mamash. You know, to sort of for impact, we use the word mamash. So what's ayin ve'efes mamash? So there makes a few points. First of all, a relatively easy point to understand, which is that a human being does not have the ability to destroy something completely. We can't. Just like we cannot make something from nothing, a human being also doesn't have the ability to take something which exists and turn it into absolute nothingness. It's just simply not possible. You can take something and burn it, but then you'll always have ashes. You can take the ashes and crumple them up and throw them into the wind, but you basically just broken them up and sent them into the wind, right? There's a machloikis how you get rid of chametz. Do you burn it? Do you crumble it up? Do you throw it into the wind? At some point, we're going to have to say, halacha says that the person has done enough to get rid of the chametz, and that's it. You know, you're not going to transgress anything on Pesach, but can you actually get rid of something to make it cease to exist? Not humanly possible. So when the Rebbe explains, when the Alter Rebbe says ayin ve'efes mamash, the Alter Rebbe means not just that it'll cease to exist, not just that it won't be in the form as we know it, right? Not just that it'll change from one form to another. Even there's such a thing, again, I'm not a scientist, but even there's such a thing as transforming something from matter into energy, right? So you can look on the one hand, you can look at it and say, the matter that existed before is now ayin ve'efes, but it's not ayin ve'efes mamash, because you didn't really completely get rid of it. It just transformed it from one form to another. So when the Alter Rebbe says that if the oisiyos, that if the letters would leave the heavens would become ayin ve'efes mamash, it means it would become nothing in a way that is beyond the scope of human ability. A human being cannot make something completely no longer exist. It can only change form, whereas if the letters would leave the heavens, it wouldn't change form, it would cease to exist completely. And then the Alter Rebbe says it would be like before Hashem said the words Yehi Rakia, Chulu, and once again the Alter Rebbe adds the word mamash. So here the Rebbe says also the Rebbe makes a few interesting points. Number one, The Rebbe says like this. The Rebbe says if the letters that Hashem used to create the world would leave the world, would leave existence, not just the heavens, but if the letters that Hashem used to bring physical existence into being, to bring yesh into being, would leave, would go back to their source. So one of the things that would cease to exist is also Zman. Time would cease to exist. Because actually, it's not for now, but the very first things that Hashem created is time and space. Everything else that Hashem creates gets placed into time and space, which actually is the simple literal meaning of the word Bereshis. Bereshis means in the beginning, which is, you can see off the bat, we're talking about time. But if the oisiyos leave, if the letters leave, so time ceases to exist. So what happens if time ceases to exist? So now you can no longer say that the object existed in the past. In other words, like this, we think, this is an insight from the Rebbe, we think, okay, right now Hashem is keeping existence into being. The oisiyos, the letters of Hashem, are keeping the heavens or all of existence in them. What if it pulls back? What if the oisiyos go back? Kerega, the Alter Rebbe says, even for a second, then it will become ayin ve'efes mamash. Okay, but at the time that it's ayin ve'efes mamash, can I say that right now it's ayin ve'efes mamash, but yesterday, while Hashem was creating it, it actually existed? One would think yes, because it did exist in the past. But the Rebbe says no, because time, Zman, itself is also a nivra, is also a creation of Hashem. So even the idea that something that existed in the past also would be false to say, because there would be no more any framework of past, present, and future. And why does the Alter Rebbe add the word mamash? Again, why does he add mamash? So the Rebbe says also another very important point. I'm just going to say it briefly, but this is what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says there's two ways to destroy something. One way, even if you're going to destroy it completely, even if you make it ayin ve'efes mamash, even within that, there's two ways. One way is where the thing exists, then you bring another koyach, an outside power, that's so powerful that it can destroy it. And not just destroy it, let's say, but destroy it mamash completely, make it completely cease to exist. That's one way. The other way is where the thing implodes and ceases to exist in and of itself. Doesn't require another koyach to come and destroy it and take it away completely. What's the difference? What's the difference whether it's destroyed by something else, whether it sucks itself into its own black hole, so to speak, and ceases to exist in and of itself? The difference is this: if another power destroys you, that just means that something else is bigger than you. Something else is more. Something else can not you, chas v'shalom, but something else can obliterate this thing until it absolutely no longer exists. But the thing in and of itself carries its own existence, either actual existence or conceptual existence. But when the thing implodes in and of itself, then nothing forced it out of existence. The thing itself can no longer exist. So the Rebbe says, when we say that the Eibishter would have withdrawn the oisiyos, that if the Eibishter would withdraw the oisiyos, chas v'shalom, and the thing would go back to ayin ve'efes mamash, it wouldn't go back to ayin ve'efes mamash in a way that something else destroyed it. Wouldn't go back to ayin ve'efes mamash because there's another koyach that comes to overpower it. But rather, it's the very force that brought it into existence in the first place, the Dvar Hashem, would pull away from it. So the thing would kind of get sucked. I'm using my own oisiyos here. The thing would get sucked into its own black hole. So not it would be destroyed by something else. It would be destroyed in and from within itself. This is a much more powerful form of something becoming absolute nothingness. Okay. This is some of what the Rebbe explains on the choice of words here of the Alter Rebbe. If the oisiyos would depart, says the Alter Rebbe, the world would become ayin ve'efes mamash, as if it never existed. Like before, Hashem said yirokia chulu, and again the word mamash. All right. Now again, as we discussed last week, the genesis of this idea helps us because we now understand that even as long as the world does exist, It's not a real existence. It's not a true existence. It's only Hashem's words that are pushing it, that are forcing it into existence. It's not a true existence. And even the superficial existence, even the superficial layer of existence that is there, it's not really the thing that's there. It's really the Dvar Hashem that's expressing itself through this physical existence. Okay, this is what we learned. I'm learning a little bit further. Says the Alter Rebbe, so it is. B'chol habruim sheb'chol ha'olamais. This idea that the Alter Rebbe taught about L'olam Hashem Dvarchem Nitzav Hashemayim, Hashem's words in the heavens, keeping the heavens in existence constantly. This, says the Alter Rebbe, is true not just with regard to the heavens, but b'chol habruim, all of Hashem's creations, sheb'chol ha'olamais, in all the worlds, elyonim v'tachtonim, higher worlds, spiritual worlds, and physical worlds. Vafilu oretz halazu hagashmis, and even this physical world, ubechinas doimim mamash, the world which is even the lowest of levels, which is mamash a doimim, which is mamash an inanimate, dead. But the Rebbe liked when we translated the word doimim as silent, something that doesn't have the power to make noise. Doimim, silent mamash. Ilu hoyu mistalkois mimena kerega chas v'shalom. Again, it's true, says the Alter Rebbe, about everything. Spiritual worlds, physical worlds, even the most inanimate, silent physical objects. If the letters from Hashem were to depart from it for a moment, chas v'shalom, the letters from those 10 utterances, from those 10 things that Hashem said, that Hashem created the world with them in the 6 days of creation. If those letters would depart, again, the words la'ayin ve'efes mamash, it would return. In other words, it would return to absolute nothingness. Ayin ve'efes mamash. Again, k'moy lifnei sheishes yimei breishis mamash. Literally, like before sheishes yimei breishis. And again, like the Rebbe explained, because it doesn't just mean that another power would implode, would destroy it. It means that the thing itself would sort of cease to exist in its own right. Okay. So here the Alter Rebbe is extending this Torah that the Baal Shem Tov said about L'olam Hashem Dvarchem Nitzav Hashemayim. The Alter Rebbe is extending it to everything that Hashem created in the 6 days of creation. The Alter Rebbe says Elyonim v'sachtonim, higher worlds, lower worlds, va'afilu, and even this physical world, an absolute doimim. This concept holds true about everything. Now, why are we saying afilu doimim? Why are we saying afilu doimim, even physical, even dead, silent physical objects, afilu doimim? Because, as the Alter Rebbe is about to explain, what that means is that every doimim that does exist, every chair, every table, every stone, every blade of, I was about to say blade of grass, but blade of grass is not diamond. Blade of grass grows, right? Every speck of dust, anything that's in existence anywhere, ever, the fact that it is in existence, again, on the one hand, its existence is not true, is not real, because it doesn't exist on its own. On the other hand, the fact that it does exist, that the Eibishter created it, means it has a specific Dvar Hashem, a specific word of Hashem, that's going to be uniquely ascribed to keep this particular fiber of existence into being, and it pushes it and pumps it into existence every single second. And if it were to stop, then this speck of dust, or this stone, or this blade of grass, or whatever the case may be, would cease to exist as if it never existed in the first place. All right. Let's learn 2 more lines. Arizal says Alter Rebbe, this is the deeper meaning of what the Arizal writes. Shegam b'doimim mamash, that even physical, silent, seemingly lifeless objects, k'moyavonim v'ofer amayim, like stones, dirt, water, yesh b'chinas nefesh v'chayis ruchnis. Everything that exists. Chassidus comes to the conclusion here. We're barely a couple of lines into Shaar Hayichud Mamuna, and we've reached the second cataclysmic, if that's the right word, mind-boggling revelation. Number 2, Everything that exists, even the tiniest, seemingly insignificant, silent physical object, has a nefesh, has a soul, b'chayis ruchnis, and spiritual life that is uniquely designed and dedicated to it and keeps it in existence. We tend to think of souls. Living things have souls. A yid has a neshama, of course. Havdil Goy has his own nefesh. All right, an animal has a nefesh. We can relate to that. Maybe even Semeach has a nefesh, something that propels it to grow. Turns out, Chassidus says, there's nothing that exists that doesn't have a nefesh. We're not calling it a neshama. We're calling it a nefesh, a uniquely divine source of energy that is uniquely for it. Everything, this is that the Arizal taught us, but Chassidus is explaining it. Everything that exists has a nefesh uniquely for it. Why? Why is that necessary? According to what we're learning now, it's necessary in order to keep it in existence. Were it not for its nefesh, it would not be able to exist. Even, quote, avonim v'ofar umayim. Okay. And of course, something that the Alter Rebbe is not going to discuss here, but discussed in many other places in Chassidus, that this idea is a one-way road, a one-way street to the concept of Hashgacha Pratis. That means that the Eibishter is involved in even the tiniest fibers of existence, the tiniest elements of existence, and not just involved in a superficial way, but involved in the most pneumistic and deepest of ways. First and foremost, to keep it in existence. And if the Eibishter if there wasn't a koyach ruchni, what he calls here a nefesh, a soul, invested in every part of creation, then it simply would not be able. It simply would not be able to exist. Okay. All these oisias, these letters, the Alter Rebbe says, they come from the Asorim Amoris, the 10 utterances that Hashem said during the 6 days of creation. That's where all the oisias come from. From here till the end of Perek Aleph, of Shaar Hayichud V'Emunah, the Alter Rebbe will deal with what seems, at least at the surface, what seems at least like a technical question. Now that we've laid the foundation of the idea, the Alter Rebbe will deal with a technical question, the technical question is, in the Asorim Amoris, the 10 utterances that Hashem said in the 6 days of creation, he only spoke about very few things. He spoke about Yehirokia, let there be a heavens, let there be light. The 10 things that the Eibishter said, Nasa Odom, let's make man, etc. But as far as what actually exists, we're talking about millions, maybe billions of different types of different types of creations. Never mind in physical things, you can have even two things that are very, very similar, almost exactly identical. You have how many blades of grass are there in the world? How many stones are there in the world? How many stars are there in the heavens? We're talking about billions, etc. So how do you have from Asorim Amoris, from 10 utterances of Hashem, how do you have from this oisios to create so many different types of existence? So this is a question that the Alter Rebbe will deal with from here till the end of Shaar Hayichud V'Emunah, explaining that these oisios, that these letters of the Asorim Amoris, created not just the general creations that were uttered explicitly by Hashem during the 6 days of creation, but actually those oisios evolve, and everything comes from those oisios, from those letters, and we'll explain why it works that way. But this is, as far as the foundational principle of the idea, this is it. And again, it's very, very famous that everything that exists in this world exists because there is a koyach ruchni, there is a divine energy, a source, a force that keeps it in existence. And if it were to stop for a second, the thing would cease to exist in and of itself. Okay. I want to explain one idea that's talked about in Chassidus a lot when it comes to this. Just to shed a little bit more light, a little bit more depth on the significance, the meaning, the importance of this idea. This idea that the Eibishter's words, letters, push things into existence, and if it were to stop, the thing would completely implode within itself to the point of becoming ayin ve'efes mamash. I'll give you a little bit in my own words, but this is the way I understood the concept as it was taught to us by our teachers. So here's the idea. If you come to a person and tell them, I want you to think up for me of a new concept. Give me a new concept, right? Kids love to play this game all the time. Tell you a new concept. I'd like to patent an idea where buildings can fly backwards on Tuesday morning at 6:30 a.m. and turn into butterflies, and then flap their wings and turn into a pickle, and then come back and Chazer Amayim Chassidus, and then turn into a robot, and then say a kapitel Tehillim, whatever. Does such a thing exist? No, of course not. Is that actually a new concept? So the truth is that it's not a new concept. What it is, it's a combination of pre-existing concepts. All right, so we say, listen, don't talk to me about buildings, don't talk to me about nothing. Give me mamash, a new concept, an idea, innovate something. So sooner or later we discover that we're actually unable to. The human being cannot truly innovate a new idea. The most we can do is we can take pre-existing ideas and we can combine them in all sorts of interesting ways. In other words, just like begashmias, just like physically, we cannot make something from nothing. We can only take something that exists and we can change its form, we can develop it. We can take dirt and we can make it into bricks. We can take bricks and make it into houses. We can make houses into cities, cities into neighborhoods, neighborhoods into provinces, into states, into countries. We can develop things, but we can only develop things if we have two stones to scratch together. If we don't have a starting point, then we have nothing. Begashmias. By the way, the other way around too, right? We can revert things back to crumbs, we can revert things back to particles, we can revert things back to all sorts of different types of matter, but never to ayin ve'efes mamash, as we discussed before. Just like this is true begashmias, with physical things, it's true conceptually as well. Everything that human beings innovate and develop, it's always a development of something that was before. The Chassidus term for this is yesh miyesh. But when people hear yesh miyesh, they think, oh, you take, you take a piece of paper and you make a paper airplane. You take, one thing and you make another. It's not just a physical reality. It's also a conceptual truth. We're not able to take ideas and destroy them completely till they don't exist. And we're not able to innovate new ideas, to create them out of nothing. We're not able to. I don't remember ever seeing the story printed, but I heard that when the Alter Rebbe was being interrogated, they asked him if he has any proof that actually there is a God. Do you have any proof that God actually exists? And the Alter Rebbe said, if there was no such thing as a God, then there would be no such concept as a God. In other words, the fact that we're even talking about whether or not this exists, this means that conceptually it already exists. Otherwise, the way people like to say it is, otherwise, what are we even talking about? The closest we can come to a concept that doesn't exist, the closest we can come to a concept that doesn't exist is a combination of two complete polar opposite ideas. The proof in the pudding for this is that no matter what type of concept a person presents, you can always picture it in your imaginative head. You can always picture it. Where we sometimes start to get stuck is when we try to put together completely opposite ideas. Like you tell a person that later in Perek Beis of Shaar, the Rebbe will talk about a miracle called Kriyas Yamsuf, right? Kriyas Yamsuf, what happened? The water stood like a wall. Can people make water stand like a wall? No, we can't do it. Can we picture it? Absolutely. A wind comes, makes the water stand up like a wall. Pretty amazing, right? But we can picture it in our head. The idea exists. What about Mokum Oren Eina Min Amida? What about the idea that the Oren in the Kodesh HaKadoshim was a combination of taking up space and not taking up space at the same time? Now our minds cannot wrap. Now we start to struggle. We can picture the Oren taking up space. We can picture the Oren not taking up space. We cannot picture it both. The mind can go back and forth. It takes up space, doesn't take up space. But the Oren didn't switch back and forth from taking up space to not taking up space. It was both taking up space and not taking up space at the same time. Now the mind starts to get stuck. And that's not even a new concept. That's just a combination of two existing concepts. But because they're such polar opposites, you try to put them together, the mind starts to get stuck. The mind starts to grapple. So Chassidus says, when we say the Eibishter created the world, yesh me'ayin, it doesn't just mean that the physicality of it was created yesh me'ayin. It doesn't just mean that before there was no cup and now there is a cup. It means, I would say, just as much or even primarily, it means the concept is created yesh me'ayin. Before the Eibishter creates a physical cup, there has to be a concept of a cup, a concept of a physical cup. And that concept also needs to be created yesh me'ayin. Now, the koyach, the Dvar Hashem that propels that pushes that into existence, the Alter Rebbe is saying it needs to be there constantly. And if it stops creating it, then the idea of cups, or the idea of nivroim, the idea of the rakia, joins the bank account of ideas that human beings cannot come up with. Just like now, the Eibishter, right now, the Eibishter could create new ideas, the Eibishter could create new nivroim. Human beings cannot. That means somewhere in the Eibishter's world, there's this ability to create new concepts, which is inaccessible to us. If the Eibishter were to pull the oisius away from the things that were already created, these ideas would revert back to the way it was before Sheshis Mei Breshis, which means that in our world, it's not just that the thing wouldn't exist, not just that it would be destroyed to the point of Ayin V'Efes Mamash, but even the concept, there would be nobody to talk about it, but there would be nothing to even talk about. The concept would not exist. The idea would not exist. And this actually, on a deeper level, gives us more depth, another layer of wisdom in the understanding of Achdus Havaya, and the unity of Hashem. Because it's not just that the things are technically kept into existence, but even conceptually, whatever it is that's going on is being propelled into existence here by the Eibishter himself. All right, this is one point I wanted to make. We'll continue in Mitzvah Hashem next week. I see somebody wrote something. Answer the question of, can God create a rock he cannot destroy? So the question is being asked, can the Eibishter create a rock that is too heavy for him to pick up, right? Or that's too powerful for him to destroy? So what's the question? The person saying they're not asking, they're saying what we're discussing answers this question. Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So what's the problem? What's the question? Can God create a rock that's too difficult? So you get stuck, right? If you say that Hashem could create the rock, then that means he can't pick it up. And if you say that Hashem cannot create the rock, then it means he can't create the rock, right? So we're intellectually stuck. So we're intellectually stuck because we've gotten to a place where ideas contradict each other. So what's the answer? Which one is it? Well, the answer is, it's like Rabbi Shei's Taub likes to say, right? You ask a Jew, is it this or that? What's the answer? The answer is yes. What does that mean? It means both and neither, etc. Hashem created the concept of rocks. Hashem created, like Rabbi Yoel Khan used to like to say, Hashem created the concept of concepts. Hashem created the fact that a rock that you could pick up and a rock that you cannot pick up are opposites. Hashem created that idea too. Hashem created us, and Hashem created our minds, and ordered us and instructed us to learn Chassidus and to understand as much as we could. If the Eibishter were to withdraw his letters from that rock, which either is or isn't too heavy for him to pick up, then the rock would cease to exist. The time within which the rock existed would cease to exist. The memory would cease to exist because there would be no more time about which we could say that the rock ever did exist in the first place. And actually, there would not just be nobody to talk about it, but there would be nothing to even talk about. And so the answer to the question, of course, is yes, Hashem could do both, and he could create the rock, and he could pick it up if he wants, and he could not pick it up if he doesn't want, and all the rest of it. So this is, in truth, this is an idea which a human mind cannot fully understand, because again, we're limited. We can only work with things which we have, and we can only change form. We can only change form from something to something else, something bigger, or to something smaller. But Chassidus has taught us to think at least a little bit, as much as possible in human terms, about this koyach of the Eibishter, the meaning of what it means that the Eibishter created the world and brought it from nothing into something, not just technically nothing, but also conceptually nothing. Okay, we'll continue next week in Mitzvah Hashem. Everybody have a wonderful week.